a pork belly, a brisket, and some meat glue to combine the two. This is either gonna be extremely epic or a complete abomination, but either way, let's do it. The nice thing about these cuts is that they're similar in shape and have a similar cooking process. So the idea of combining the two seems possible. Pork belly is also extremely fatty, while brisket is a bit more lean. So the two should balance each other out. And before we talk about this meat glue, which I am very excited about, let's prep the meat. This is a whole packer brisket, which means it has that fatty point and lean flat still attached. As you can see, the point section of this brisket is extremely thick, so let's trim it down to a size that's closer to the pork belly. While the point is about 5 inches thick, the leaner flat is only about 2. When normally cooking a whole brisket, I never separate these two muscles. In fact, this was the first time I've ever done this. Part of what makes cooking brisket fun and challenging is that the flat and point are very different muscles. But I'm just following the seam and doing my best to leave that flat intact. Here you can really see how much fat runs along that seam. It's why that first slice when cutting a brisket in half can be so juicy. And we're left with this beautiful point section and the flat that we'll be using for this video. As you can see, now our brisket and our pork belly are close to the same size. But before we can combine the two, let's talk about that meat glue. This is meat glue, and it does exactly what the name sounds like. Meat glue comes in a few different varieties, but surprisingly, it's just a powder. It's completely dry, not sticky in any way, can be used on both cooked and uncooked meat, and has zero taste whatsoever. If you've ever eaten turkey deli meat, chances are transglutaminase was used. I always thought it was just one giant turkey breast, but really it's multiple breasts glued together to get those big slices. Okay, so to combine these two, we're gonna take slices about 1 inch thick, and we're going brisket, pork, brisket, pork, brisket, pork, brisket, pork, brisket, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. I started by taking slices off the brisket flat. This was one of those experiments where I had no idea what the end product might look like, and I chose 1 inch slices pretty arbitrarily. At first, I thought it would be cool to make the slices extremely thin, but I figured getting them to stick together if they were too thin would be difficult. Continue taking slices from the pork belly, and I'm just doing my best to keep them as consistent in shape and thickness as possible. These look just about right. We're left with really nice slices from both the brisket and the pork belly. So here you can really see the difference between these two cuts. The beef brisket is extremely lean, though it does have that fat cap, whereas the pork belly is just so incredibly fatty. And the goal is that by layering them on top of each other, the fat from that pork belly will keep this nice and juicy. And time to put this meat glue to the test. I laid out some plastic wrap and got to work. Because the meat glue is a powder and not sticky, it was hard to judge how much to actually use, so I erred on the side of adding a whole bunch of it. And now we're gonna apply our beef brisket right on top, pressing that in, and that's the first layer. And I actually ended up doing this 2 times. On the first run, I only added the powder to one side of each slice, but I started to have serious doubts about this meat glue. The powder seemed to dry out the exterior of the slices, and the lack of moisture prevented any sort of binding from occurring. So I went back and redid each slice on both sides, but still, hopes were not very high. But either way, we had our pork and beef slices all laid out in the shape of a square, and it was time to keep going. Okay, so I realized halfway through doing this, you're not supposed to inhale this stuff. Very shocking, I know. So having a little bit of a health scare right now, but if you're seeing this, I'm probably alive, so hopefully we're good. But seriously, make sure you're wearing a mask if you use this stuff. To make sure it seals, we're just gonna wrap up our present. Just trying to keep it nice and tight. Fridge overnight. Okay, it's been 12 hours. Let's see what we got. So I was reading last night that transglutaminase doesn't really bind to fat, and pork belly's all fat, so we'll see if this worked. I'm just carefully removing this plastic wrap. At this point, being extremely gentle to avoid breaking it apart. So it looks like it's actually worked. Pretty tight seal between them, but we'll find out for sure once it's cooked. Just gonna square up the side Pretty cool looking cross section here. So my sister pointed out that this kind of looks like an American flag, so we're gonna have a little fun with it. This here is a blue colored barbecue seasoning. To get that blue color, all I did was add spirulina. If you're watching this on the 4th of July, then happy 4th. I really hope you're able to get outside and do some grilling. Today also marks the 2-year anniversary of my first ever food video, and this one's giving me major flashbacks. American flag flank steak with cheese and bacon.
Down south, hood baby, make all the girls go.
Time for the finishing touch.
Spend some time with some of the pros. Then we give her back. Psych. We don't even give her back. Nope. We ain't even really getting into that.
Now we're just gonna season the rest of this with a barbecue rub. And today, I decided to only season the top to avoid overhandling it. Let's get it on the grill. The sun is out, could not be a better day for grilling, and we're smoking over applewood, low and slow. I kept the temps relatively low at 225 Fahrenheit. Notice how that smoke is nice and light, slowly infusing that meat with that sweet applewood flavor. After about 6 hours, we've developed some great bark and reached 200 Fahrenheit internal. Okay guys, here it is. We have our pork belly brisket Frankenstein steak. Not even too sure what to call this thing. At first I thought it would sort of fall apart, but it looks great, smells incredible. Let's slice into it. Finally, the moment I've been waiting for. My knife slid through like butter, revealing what is probably the first ever brisket pork belly hybrid roast. I could tell it was tender and still nice and juicy. Okay, this thing is crazy looking. It almost looks like teeth. Now we're just gonna take some slices. Fully stands up on its own weight. That meat glue worked perfectly. And pulls apart like links on a chain. And just visually, it's like nothing I've ever seen before. And of course, we gotta try the bend test. Kinda works. Okay guys, we've finally made it. Visually, this is looking unbelievable. Let's grab a little piece here, a few links of the chain. I'm going for a bite. Wow, I know there's gonna be some people that do not believe me, but this is incredible. You get that beefy flavor from the brisket. You also get that richness from the pork belly. The two combined is perfect, because the reality is that most brisket flats are a little bit too lean, whereas most pork bellies are often too fatty. So even though it's a lot of work, this combination works. Now I will say, going into this situation with gluing two meats together, I was a little skeptical. Whenever I think of things like turduckens or anything that has multiple types of meat, I do get kind of weirded out, but with this here, I was pleasantly surprised. Let me know if you want to see any other crazy experiments with meat glue or really anything else. Drop a comment down below. If you did enjoy this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.